Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday, February 16th, 2025 writing reading class. Hope you had a good week. Let's go ahead and get started. Just give me a one in the chat room to let me know you can hear me okay, and we'll begin. Perfect. And so we will start off with our quote of the day with some expansion, and then get into a reading with a quiz, talk about some theories for good writing, introduce a new book, then also wrap up with some vocabulary. Let's begin with our quote. Alice, can you read the quote over on the left?
In the Middle East, the conflict today is a matter of generations and not of cultures.
Excellent. So let's reflect on this a little bit. If you're familiar with the Middle East, you definitely know that there's been a lot of problems for a very, very long time. But what do you think this quote means when it says the conflict is a matter of generation, not cultures? Think about the two words, generation versus culture. What do you think the author of this quote is trying to say? Any thoughts? Amy, what do you think?
I think maybe is in the Middle East, there's a lot of conflicts, and the conflicts is not because of the difference of cultures, but because of the um but because of uh
So when you say culture, what do you mean by culture? Try to use some different vocabulary than the, the vocabulary in the quote. What do you mean when you say culture?
like um I don't really know what is culture synonym.
Okay. Can you describe it?
Like it's something like uh a a part of people like they often do something like we could call that culture.
Okay. And did you have any more comments on the difference between the two? What they're trying to say between generation and culture?
Um, Not really.
No? Okay. Ethan, any thoughts on what this quote means?
I don't know.
No? Ken, any thoughts? Maybe someone can tell me, what does the word generation mean? Generations. Alice, are you familiar with this word generations?
No idea.
No? Okay. Well, let me explain a little bit. When we think of generations, or when we talk about generations, we're talking about your family, your parents, your grandparents, your great great parents, your great 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 grandparents. So generations would be each of those lines going back into the past. That's what we refer to as a generation. Now, Amy, I think you're kind of hitting on the line of culture. When we think about culture, culture is the defining characteristics of a group of people. So, for example, the type of food that they eat, or the type of clothes that they wear, or the certain habits that a certain group of people might have. So, what they're saying here is that the problems, the conflict, is has more to do with the different generations from the past than of the culture as it is. Now, what do you think that means? What are they saying when they say this has to do with the past, these conflicts from past generations versus the current culture? Ethan, any thoughts?
Hmm, I don't know.
Not sure. So what they're saying in this is that the conflicts have been passed down. The conflicts have moved from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. It's not about just the current culture and differences there, but it's just because of a mentality, a way of thinking that has been passed down from generation to generation. I think that's an important lesson for us to remember when we think about why we feel the way we feel. Is it truly the reason behind it based on something that happened to us now or during our lifetime, or is it something that we learned from the past? Sometimes that can be healthy, sometimes maybe not. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Middle East now, just so you can understand where we're discussing. This is the area of the world that's considered the Middle East, including countries such as Syria, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan. Let's read a little bit. Ken, can you read the first paragraph?
War has plagued the
Plague,
Middle East,
plague,
plagued the plague the Middle East for centuries. Patriotism is
patriotism,
used patriotism is used as a tool to accumulate accumulate wealth and oppress the rights of
minorities,
minorities. Religion and tribalism
tribalism,
tribalism are
tribalism,
of tribalism are often mi-
militarized,
militarized, making the use of violence
legitimate,
legitimate and normal. Humans are not seen as humans, but as either friend or foe.
Good. Amy, can you read the second paragraph?
Western leaders and in
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Western leaders and institutions have a limited understanding and familiarity with Middle Eastern
Societies,
societies, cultures, and politics. This
politics.
often leads to politics. This often leads to a focus on increasing arms and ammun-
Uh,
ammunition,
ammunition,
ammunition supplies, and offering military training, especially in times of a violent
insurgency,
insurgen- insurgency, instead of the much needed humanitarian
humanitarian.
humanitarian, educational, and developmental aid.
Alice, can you read the third paragraph?
This creates an ongoing cycle wherein whoever has the most military strength holds power and steps into the same pattern of governmental rule. This thinking leads to the conclusion that these societies are doomed to remain in blood bloodshed
Bloodshed.
where the best treatment is the importing of more and more weapons. This approach fails to address the root problems and instead contributes to the cycle of violence.
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 And Ethan, the final paragraph.
The West must realize that the real danger lies in the empowerment of religious fanatics and systemic
System, sorry, systemic,
systemic corruption that have replaced true critical thinking, quality education, and effective institutions. These
Institutions.
institutions. These two elements, rule of law and the culture of diversity, are the only means through which autocracy and religious fundamentalism
Good.
fundamentalism can be overthrown.
And that was autocracy. Autocracy. Some great words in here. We'll look at some of these vocabulary words in a little bit. But I want you to do a little bit of reflection on this based on our conversation about the quote. And this is kind of taking your opinion about war. Number one, you can answer one of the questions, either number one or two. Do you think the conflict is necessary? Why or why not? I'll go ahead and just add in here the conflict in the Middle East is necessary. Why or why not? Or you can focus on number two. What do you think two countries at war should do in order to end their fighting? Now, I'll go back to the article if you want to gather any information based on the article. But this is opinion-based writing. So you won't use too much from the article. What I do want you to focus on, though, is supporting your argument. So one of the easiest ways to do that is using because. Then from there, giving us a deeper explanation as you do a supporting argument. And then give some final reflection as far as if what you suggest or feel happens, what's the future outcome of it? Once you have your writing complete, you can submit it to me privately in the chat room, and then we'll take a moment and discuss. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the writing that's coming in. If you want to submit, just go ahead and start to wrap up, and then we'll get a chance to look at it before we move on. Let's start with you, Ken. Can you read yours for the group?
The two countries should end their war. Firstly, because if you attack other country, they will attack back, which means you have just impacted yourself. It should be one word.
Yes.
Secondly, wars will cause more death for your country. So last, even if you win the battle, your country is seriously damaged, and if you have another fight, your country will suffer.
Excellent. All right, Ken, some great points that you brought up here. Now, one of the things that I really like is the language use that you did of firstly, secondly, and then you said at last. Now, I'm going to encourage you on this one to actually use, let me go ahead and mute you here for a second, Ken, to use finally, or you could use thirdly. That way you could keep similar language for each one of them that we have just the consistency with those transition words. So either thirdly or lastly. Now yours probably, since you said at last, I'm going to go ahead and say lastly. Another choice you could say would be finally. Now, since you listed 3 points, I would actually let your readers know that you're going to talk about those 3 points in the beginning. And so if we go to the top, you're talking about two countries. I'm going to actually get rid of the because we're not talking specifically about two countries. We're talking about two countries in general, any two countries. Two countries should end their war for three main reasons. Now we can expect what we know as a reader, what we're going to expect, how many reasons we're going to hear. I'm going to give you also another phrasing. Should stop a war. Actually, no, let's keep yours. I'm just going to add in their wars. Now it sounds a little bit more that we're not talking about a specific war. Okay. Now you went on to firstly, we don't actually need the because here. You can just go ahead and make your conditional statement. If you attack another country, they will attack back, which means you have just impacted yourself. What did you mean by impacted yourself?
I'm just telling that if you attack others, they'll defend yourself and like hurt you back because
Oh,
you
okay.
back.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, let me I like what how about we do this? They will attack back. How about we say something like thus hurting yourself? A little bit shorter, but also reflects on that point that you end up hurting yourself in return. Great. Now, if we go to the second point, you said, secondly, wars will cause, just highlight this, will cause more deaths for your country. I'm going to suggest in your country in this particular point, because I
Yes,
think the focus you want to say is that your people of your country will also die. And then lastly, if you win the battle, comma, your country is seriously damaged. Now, I'm going to go ahead and notice how you did most of your sentences. If you attack another country, comma, they will attack. And then in the second one, you said wars will cause more death. Let's keep that same language, which is known as the first conditional. It's funny you mentioned this because we're going to be talking about
yeah.
the conditionals later on today. Your country will be
Suffer.
seriously damaged. I'll mute you once again, Ken, here. Will be seriously damaged. That way, we're using this first conditional constantly. As I mentioned, we're going to look at the first conditional a little bit later. Now, you mentioned this point. We actually should put a period here. And then let's mention this last. If you have another fight, your country will suffer. Now, I think this part is kind of implied. I don't think it really reflects on the final outcome. Let me give you another suggestion. If you could say something like, in the end, war is not worth the loss. Now, that sort of summarizes everything, all your 3 points that you were mentioning with this final reflection, because it's always based on what I originally said, my original argument that why I want to when I think about this final reflection. But very good, Ken. This is one of your stronger writings that you've done for since you've started here. So great job. I see the improvement. Well done. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at Amy. Amy, do you want to go ahead and read yours?
In my opinion, two countries at war should focus on conflicts here and they're fighting. They might be fighting for resources, territories, etc. For example, if they're fighting for resources, the country that wants to take the other country's resources should give an equivalent amount of money. Now the two countries could end their fighting.
Okay. All right, Amy. Some nice points you brought here. Let me take a look at this one. You said two countries at war should focus on conflicts to end their fighting. What did you mean by conflicts? Because
Like
go ahead.
the point where they started the fighting, because starting fighting should have a reason, or
Okay,
it's not
perfect.
very
So how about we say something that makes that a little bit more clear? Should focus on the initial reason of their fighting. Now that brings a little bit better focus um, to what you meant by that conflict. Okay, now you give us an example. They might be fighting for resources. For example, if they're fighting for resources, the country that wants to take the other country's resource should give an equivalent amount of money. So are you saying here that the country that wants the resource should pay for the resources?
Yes.
Okay. I think we could say that a little bit easier, a little bit more clear. Should pay for those resources. Now, why do you think they should pay for it?
Because they want to take another countries, uh they're not taking it from their own country, so I think they should pay for it.
So let me give you a situation. Let's say that we have a country that does not have resources available and they don't have the financial means to pay for it. What should they do in that situation?
Mm, Perhaps they could try to get some financial resources.
Okay. Okay. Because this actually is one of the main causes of a lot of conflicts and a lot of wars is that a country is in a situation where they don't have resources, so they feel they have to take it because they feel like it's an unfair divide of resources. So you think they should try to borrow from another place?
Like uh something like that.
Okay. Let me give you another way of thinking about this. Perhaps sometimes because I could see the situation that you're discussing be causing even more conflict for the country. Is there a way for a country to perhaps maybe think about what resource they can offer?
Yes.
So, in a sense, that might actually be, as we think about really proving our making a point that doesn't bring up a lot of questions, maybe something that's a little bit more balanced. Because I could see your readers thinking, well, if they borrow money, that's going to cause even more because then they have to pay back the money that they didn't have. So it seems like it's making worse. Do you see my point there?
Yes.
Okay, so let me make a suggestion. Why don't we add on to this second sentence in the beginning and say, um, the country that wants to take, you said the country that wants to take the other country's resource should pay for those resources or find a way to contribute something for the other country that the other country values. And I'll say if possible in this case. And that way we have this other way of thinking about how we can provide, because this actually was the way that many, most people lived and before money was established. Before there was actually money, people used what was called a bartering system, which was the idea that if you have something of value that I want, then I will trade that with you for something of value that I want, that the other person wants. And it worked really well because we were always trying to find the needs of others. So you had a good point there. But I think what we needed to do is just make your point, try to find fix some of the cracks in the point. The way you presented it was well done, but as far as the content, we needed something a little bit more um, uh, realistic to consider in nature. All right, very good. Ethan, let's have you read yours.
In my opinion, there are two reasons to explain the war that happens in the Middle East is not supposed to happen. Firstly, for the people in the country, it will seriously affect them working, which leads to population collapse. Secondly, the countries that start the war will have to suffer from economic loss. These reasons explain why the countries in the Middle East have to stop the war.
Okay, excellent. All right, so Ethan, your final statement here, I feel, is the most clear of what you were trying to say. Let's take that idea and look at the beginning opening statement that you had. You said, in my opinion, there are two reasons to explain, but it sounds like what you're trying to say is that ex two reasons to explain why there should not be, or why the war in the Middle East needs to stop. Is that what your question was that you were trying to answer?
Yes.
Okay. And here's the thing, if you incorporate the question, the original question in your answer, that'll actually make it easier too, because now you're versus trying to create something completely new. So how about we say something like this? If we look at the original question, it was, what do you think two countries at war should do to end their fighting? Oh wait, or were you answering number one? Do you think the conflict in the Middle East is necessary?
Yes.
Which one? Number one or number two?
Number one.
Okay. So in my opinion, the conflict in the Middle East is not necessary for two reasons. That would be a really great statement because it incorporates a question and then it also highlights that you're going to talk about two things. So, in my opinion, the conflict in the Middle East is not necessary for two reasons. That's always a great trick. If you're trying to come up with how to start your writing and you're answering a question, just incorporate the question. It's going to be clear to your readers, and your teachers too, that you're clearly answering the question. Okay, firstly, now if we keep this as our focus, this question answering, firstly, what do you when you say it will seriously affect their working, what will happen?
They will all have to move to other countries
Why?
because there's no money to live,
Why?
to survive.
Why? Why is there no money?
Because if the country is like having a war with the other, they will have like because they have to battle, they will have they won't have the environment to work.
Is this because buildings are destroyed? Is this because I'm still not sure what is the reason why they can't work?
The buildings are destroyed and they couldn't go out.
Okay, let's say that. That's much clearer. Firstly, war causes destruction of buildings. But we could even say even more than that. How about if you reflect on the destruction of homes and businesses? I think this tells a lot more of why it would lead to population collapse. It's that destruction. Because remember, there are still going to be jobs available. Going to war, if someone is in a soldier, they're still getting paid. But the problem is really the destruction of the land. So now people that have businesses or have homes, they can't live, they can't work. Yes, and then as a result, we can see the population collapse. Now, secondly, you said the countries that, oh, let's see here. The countries that started the war will have to suffer economic loss. Why will they suffer economic loss?
Because nobody works, so they wouldn't be able to get money.
Okay, how about we say this? Secondly, or even as a result, well, I want to include your secondly because you did mention that in the beginning. Secondly, and as a result, because this seems to be tied into the destruction now, this destruction will lead to economic loss. Now, I need to explain this. If people are not able to work, just saying economic loss is not enough information to support that reason. So even within your answer of firstly, secondly, make sure you include why. Now, this last statement, these reasons explains why countries in the Middle East have to stop war. We already said that in the beginning. What's the result if they stop war?
Uh, it wouldn't cause to a great economic loss,
You've already said
and
that.
maybe
Tell me
and
something
maybe
new.
they will earn money.
Tell me something new because you already made those as your point. Think bigger. Think long term. You could even reflect on the opposite long term. What will happen if a country destroys homes and businesses and loses economic loss? Or think about if a company doesn't, or if a country doesn't destroy homes and businesses and has economic growth. What's the long term effect of it?
Maybe it could get to a strong country.
Okay. If a country, so let's make a statement of that. So when we think about this final conclusion, it really needs to be like a long term or future outlook, not reflective of what we already talked about, but reflective of something more. If a country can find peace and not conflict, then it can prosper and what was the word you used? And become a, forget what was the word you used. How about we say something like global leader? Good. That makes sense, Ethan, on how to, we just want to make sure that we really think about the whys behind the reasons that we give. Love the structure, just we need to develop a little bit more deeper thoughts on those. Now, we had some statements actually that we were just creating with both Ethan and Ken actually. Oh, Alice, did I miss our writing for you?
Yep.
Oh, okay, let me go back. I see it now. Okay, let me grab yours, Alice. Let's see. Oops. you want to go ahead and read yours?
When two countries at war, I think they should calm down and then talk together. They can talk about why the problem became bigger and bigger. Also, they can talk about why or who made this problem happen. The reason is that when they can't calm down to talk, then the war will become more fierce and more people will die from the war.
Excellent. Alice, this was a good point that your message is um you think it through well, you reflect on both sides of it. Well done. Now let's just talk about a couple of grammar things, but the material here is really good. When two countries are at war, I think they should calm down and talk together. Now I'm going to give you um another way of saying that and discuss their conflicts, or we could even say discuss their disagreements. Exactly what you said, just a different way, a more academic way of saying that. Um, but good point there. Now you give us some reflection on that. They they can talk about why the problem. They can talk about why the problem became, and I'm going to give you a different way of saying bigger and bigger. Became so. You can just say big. I'll give you another synonym, immense. So big or immense. And then you give us another example, what could reflect from this. They could also talk about why or who made, we want to make sure this is past tense because this would have been in the past, made the problem happen. I'll give you another word, occur, as uh, another phrasing there. But two important points I feel that you just discussed there. The reason is that the reason for what? The reason is that when they, okay, so how about we just say, instead of the reason, let's say if they can't calm down, I'm going to give you a different word also for calm down since we used it earlier. If they can't discuss things rationally, then the war will become more fierce. Fierce, we kind of use for more um, fierce is more kind of more for an adjective for someone. Here's another option. Will become more intense, and you could even say destructive. That was another option for you. And more people will die. And I think from the war, we understand that already, so we don't really need that part. More people will die. So good. This is a great development there. This is just a little bit of language changes that give it more of an academic ring. Well done. Okay, now let's talk about these two conditionals because many of you, as you were reflecting on your writing, you needed to use a conditional. And in many cases, it was what's known as the first conditional. But let's talk about the difference between the zero and the first conditional. Look at these two sentences for a second. If we go on vacation, we only bring a carry-on. Versus, if we go on vacation, we will only bring a carry-on. The first one you see there is the zero conditional, and the second one is the first conditional. Who can tell me what is the difference between the two? Ken, did you want to speak? What's
Yeah,
what is the difference in the meaning between the two?
the meaning is the first conditional is talking about is now. you say this, and so this vacation will happen some days later.
So which
He's
one are you?
talking about future, and the zero is just turning. Okay, so this means the zero is just now.
Okay, you're close. You're close. Now, you were right about the first conditional. The will is talking about the future. This statement, when we use the first conditional, which is the second sentence, if we go on vacation, we will only bring our carry-on. We're talking about a situation where something is likely to happen in the future. The first sentence you see, which is the zero conditional, this is talking about a habit. It is talking about a habit or a fact. This person is saying that every single time they go on vacation, they only bring a carry-on. Whereas the second one, the first conditional, is talking about what will happen likely in the future. And that's the difference. The zero conditional is talking about a habit or a fact, where the first conditional is talking about a likely future event. Now, when things are expressed and they are a fact, like we know this to be true, we always use the zero conditional, which is using the present tense both on the if part of the statement and the result part of the statement. As you see under zero conditional, under the form, it's all present simple on both parts of the statement. However, when we are talking about this situation that is likely to occur, first conditional, we use present simple during the if part of the statement and then future will or won't during the result part of the statement. Now, understand this. Whatever tense is with if, must always stay with if. So in both of these tenses, it's always present simple that must stay with it. How it's the second part that changes. Also note this. The if part of the statement could appear in the later part of the sentence, but it still must always be with present simple. For example, if I look at these sentences, on the first one, I could say, we will only bring a carry-on if we go on vacation. I put the if part now in the later part of the sentence. I could do the same with this first conditional. We will only bring a carry-on if we go on vacation. However, even if my order of the cause and the effect switch, I must always keep the if with the present simple. Let's take a look at some sentences and see how you do with these. Let's look at the first one. First question is it zero or is it first conditional? If you, with the verb heat ice, it with the verb melt. Is this zero or first conditional? Are we talking about a habit or fact? Or are we talking about something that is likely to happen in the future? Raise your hand if you think you know. Amy, I see you typed something in the chat room. Do you want to offer up?
Um, uh, I think, I now think it should be the zero conditional.
What changed your mind?
Because at first I thought, like, if you heat ice, like, in the future, it will melt, but I thought about it, and I think that if you heat ice, it always will melt.
That's right. It is a fact because it always occurs. And so you're right. Now, how would you say this one, Amy, in the zero conditional?
If you heat ice, if you heat ice, if you heat ice, it should melt.
So zero conditional is always present simple. So you see here, it's present simple during the if part and present simple during the result part. Any guess on how that goes? So this would be if you heat ice, it melts. Using just the present simple with it, third person, melts. If you heat ice, it melts. Let's take a look at one more. If it with the verb rain tomorrow, we with the verb stay indoors. Ken?
If it rains tomorrow, we will stay indoors.
Good. Now look at the first part. If it rain or rains.
Rain.
So it's third person. What do we add on third person? Present simple.
Third person.
So it. So is it rain or rains with an S?
Rain.
Is that with or without an S?
With an S.
With an S. That's correct. Third person always gets the S in present simple. So if it rains with an S tomorrow, we will stay indoors. Very good. So that is the difference between the first and zero conditional. Feel free to practice some of these other ones for additional practice and using the chart from previous before to help you with the formation of that. But we use this for general truths, our facts, the zero conditional. And then for the first conditional, this is talking about things that will happen in the future, where we use the future will. Now we have a new book for this week. Our book this week is Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book. Here's a little description about the author and the summary. Let's take a moment and read the summary. Alice, can you read that first paragraph?
Nobody owns no to his friends as Bob is a perfectly normal boy. Well, he would be perfectly normal if he didn't live in a graveyard being raised and educated by ghosts with a solitary guardian who belongs to neither the world of the living nor the world of the dead.
Nathan, can you read the second paragraph?
There are dangers and adventures for Bob in the graveyard, the strange and terrible menace of the Slayer, a gravestone entrance to a desert that leads to the city of ghosts, friendship with the witch, and so much more.
And then Amy, can you read the last two sentences?
But it is in the land of the living that real danger lurks, for it is there that the man Jack lives, and he has already killed Bob's family. A deliciously dark masterwork by best-selling author Neil Gaiman with illustrations by award-winning Dave McKean.
Excellent. So if you think of that might be an interesting book for you, I encourage you to read that book. Now we had some great vocabulary. I want you to take one of these words in the last couple of minutes and to use it in a sentence. Make sure that we can understand clearly what the meaning is from your sentence, either legitimate, faux, insurgency, fanatics, or autocracy. Once you have your sentence, you can submit, and then we'll take a look and discuss. Okay, let's take a look at the sentences coming in. If you want to submit, just go ahead and quickly wrap up, send it in. Ken, you wrote, my classmate Henry is a foe to me at school. Now, I'm going to, the sentence is good. Is a, we could just say is a foe at school. Now, let us know why and we don't get along. So now it helps us understand that word a little bit better. If we add that phrase and we don't get along, now we understand if someone didn't understand what a foe is, what you mean by that. But good sentence. Let me copy over Alice. Alice, you wrote, the government has been fighting an insurgency in the North region for years. Um, this is good. I'm going to just make a suggestion here. Has been fighting against, has been fighting against an insurgency in the northern region. That works. That works better now for that statement. Now, why is it? Maybe we could say since the citizens don't agree with the government's policies. Now, once again, that helps us understand even better what insurgency might be. We get the sense that it's some type of conflict. Very good. All right, everyone. Now, as we start to wrap up today, I want you to think about our new vocabulary words that we learned. You'll need them for the after class quiz questions. Also, the meaning of the difference between and formation of the zero conditional and the first conditional. And then this week for your writing assignment, I want you to ask yourself, if you were a trainer of a sport or hobby, what things would you tell your team to do to make them the best? Now, we had one more writer just that came in. I'm going to copy yours over, Amy, and just take a look at it real quick. You wrote, one day Lily was suspicious of Mary's business, that Mary's business is not legitimate. Let's change that to was not legitimate. Lily started to be cautious of Mary. Good. That works nicely. I'm just going to change this to was. Since you're telling us the story, we always put stories in the past tense. Okay, and then here's your sentences for the after class quiz questions with the words of the day and the answer key to check your answers. I'll go ahead and copy over today's link if you'd like to get started with any of the exercises. Just go ahead and click on the link and request access. Then I'll be able to grant that to you. But any questions as we wrap up for today? All right, I will see you all next Sunday. Have a great week.
See you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.